Good morning, everyone. Today I'm joined by Elleithee, founding executive director of the Institute of Politics and Public Service at our McCourt School of Public Policy, GU Politics. She's a graduate of our School of Foreign Service and returned 5 years ago to launch GU Politics, which is celebrating its 5th anniversary this year. So Mo, thank you for being with me for this conversation, joining us today. And by the time this video is posted, voting will have concluded for an historic election day. We continue to reflect on and engage in dialogue about civic responsibility. And in this conversation, we focus on opportunities for civic engagement for the Georgetown community. We recorded this conversation ahead of Election Day. It won't reflect the events of Election Day. So let me start by asking you about the work of GU Politics and one of the ideas that I know has been important to you, and I'll quote, "Public service is a good thing. Politics can be too." Can you talk about this moment for GU Politics and what you hope it helps to accomplish?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me back, by the way. I love this series at a time when we can't all be gathering together on the hilltop. It's such a great way to feel connected to one another as a Georgetown community. So thank you for doing it and for having me back. Public service is a good thing. Politics can be too. When we launched the Institute in August of 2015, the 2016 campaign was just getting started. And I came back to Georgetown after spending 20 years in electoral politics, still loving my life's work, but realizing not a lot of other people did, right? Not a lot of other people appreciated the business of politics, the way it was being conducted. But I still believe then and now that politics is necessary, it's important, it's how we as a democracy settle our differences, especially when it's done right, but it's not always being done right. And so what we've always hoped to achieve at the Institute at GU Politics is so many of our students come to Georgetown because they want access to the nation's capital, because they're interested in some form of public service. So we really try to do a couple of things: pull back the curtain for them so that they can see the practice of politics in real time through the eyes of practitioners, but more importantly, to engage with practitioners to find ways to do it better. And our motto, the politics can be two-part, that has certainly been tested in recent years, but we're finding increased participation and interest from the Georgetown community, more students seeing it as truly a vehicle for change and hopefully doing it better than my generation did it.
Now, one important opportunity at GU Politics is our GU Politics Fellows program. Can you tell us about the program and what kinds of experiences it creates?
It's one of my favorite parts of the program. Every semester, we bring in 5 to 6 active practitioners of politics, Capitol Hill veterans, high-level campaign operatives, former elected officials, leaders of major advocacy organizations, people who are very much in the trenches, who want to contribute to the student community. They want to share their experience and insight with students, but also who come here to maybe get a different perspective for themselves. Our fellows spend time every week with students, whether it's on campus when we are allowed to be on campus, whether it's on campus in small discussion groups or one-on-one in office hours, or in the current environment, they're continuing to do it via Zoom and online. But it is leading conversations every week, again, pulling back the curtain so that students can complement the theory that they're getting in their classes through the experience of these practitioners. And every single fellow we've ever had has told me as they finished the program that they ended up getting as much or more out of it than the students did, a whole new perspective. Our fellows have included former elected officials like former Congresswoman Ileana Ross-Lehtinen, first Latina elected, Republican Latina elected to Congress, to former Governor Martin O'Malley. We've had leaders of advocacy organizations like Grover Norquist. We've had one class, we had the former chiefs of staff to both Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell as fellows classmates. So they span the ideological divide, but they're all committed to the same notion, which is helping students understand the process and learning from them how they can do it better when they go back to their day jobs.
Thank you. Now, in preparation for Election Day 2020, GU Politics and an initiative led by students called GU Votes worked to encourage members of our community to be engaged in this civic process, and for those who are eligible to vote, to be registered and to vote. It was terrific to see the partnership with our athletics teams too. Can you talk about this work that you've been engaged in?
So what I love about this program is it was student conceived and completely student run. It was back in our first year of existence as an institute. A number of our students came to us wanting to find a way to help mobilize more of their colleagues, more of their classmates to vote. And so they launched what initially started as a campus-wide voter registration drive. And then once all the voter registration deadlines passed, they just kept going and turned it into a campus-wide voter engagement and turnout effort. They've been incredibly creative in the ways that they would go about it. You know, they would do the traditional tabling that you always see, but they started phone banking fellow students. They started doing storm the dorm events where they would go into every residence hall and go door knocking and encouraging people to do it. That really paid off in the two elections that have taken place since they started, 2016 and 2018. We've seen student voting participation at Georgetown increased by 143%. And it's because it's not just the work that they're doing, but as you referenced, they're reaching out to campus-wide partners like the athletics department, like Residence Life, working with various student organizations. When we moved to the virtual environment that we're in, they decided to go full throttle and keep the momentum going. They've had some really tremendous successes, like leading the student effort to encourage the university to make voter registration easier, resulting in an online portal that's connected to the class registration process. So when students go to register for their classes, they can simultaneously register to vote. And they've partnered with some external folks to help students who are scattered all over the country and all over the world keep track of voting rules and regulations and deadlines in their own states. So students are getting automatic reminders via email and text messaging when their state's voter registration deadline approaches, helps them understand what the vote by mail or absentee or early voting process is in their states. And we keep getting feedback from students that it's been a tremendous resource as they try to make sense, particularly in the pandemic, how they can remain civically engaged.
So share with us some of the events that are happening now. Where can our community go to learn about events and activities, and where can they participate if they're interested in engaging around election week?
Well, the best way to keep track of everything that we're doing, you can go to our site, politics.georgetown.edu, sign up for our newsletter, or you can follow us on social media, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, at GU Politics, where we're constantly updating the types of programming that we're doing. Election Day is going to be very special in terms of programming. We've been doing a lot of events in the run-up to the election that talk about various aspects of it. For example, a couple of weeks ago, we hosted the Democratic Secretary of State from Michigan and the Republican Secretary of State from Ohio for a joint conversation to sort of talk about fact versus fiction in terms of some of the information that's out there about the voting process, particularly vote by mail. And 2 days later, we hosted two former secretaries of Homeland Security, Jay Johnson from the Obama administration and Michael Chertoff from the Bush administration, to talk about foreign intervention in our elections and just overall election integrity. So we've been doing a lot of things like that to help students make sense of what's going on. In 2016, we decided that we wanted to make Election Day a campus-wide celebration of politics, of campus-wide celebration of civic engagement. And so we started putting together day-long itineraries for Election Day, where we would bring in all these non-traditional student organizations to participate. The Georgetown Running Club would lead the morning with an Election Day run, and the student yoga club would do an Election Day meditation. We're still doing that in the virtual environment. And so starting that morning, we're going to have a bipartisan breakfast with the Georgetown Bipartisan Coalition, which will include two former members of Congressman, one Democrat and one Republican, to have a sort of that bipartisan kickoff to the day. We're doing political trivia with the Georgetown Program Board, led by Professor Tony Arend. I can't think of anyone who will bring more excitement to that. There'll be a panel in the middle of the day on the Electoral College with Professor Mark Rome. One of our fellows, former Congresswoman Mia Love from Utah, will be hosting an Election Day discussion group with students. Throughout the day, we're going to be engaging with various political practitioners around the country to get a sense as to what's actually happening out there, going inside the DNC war room and inside maybe one of the Republican campaigns, just so students can understand like what they do on Election Day. And all this will be via Zoom. And then that night, since we can't gather in person for our traditional election night watch party, we're going to do it virtually. We've got a Slack channel where students will be chatting throughout the night as returns come in. We'll periodically be breaking away to Zoom to talk to people. I, for one, will be part of the election night coverage for one of the major networks that night. So I'll zoom in from being on set and sort of giving them a sense as to what's happening at the network and what we're hearing. We're going to have members of campus ministry participate to have conversations throughout the night to help students process as returns come in. It's a very emotional night. There'll be a lot of people who are celebrating and a lot of people who won't be, no matter how it's going. And so having members of campus ministries there to kind of help students process in real time. And we're going to be stressing throughout the night that we probably won't know anything that night, right? That this one may take a little while. And so in the days following, we're going to follow up with some conversations about what's happening as the process plays out in the hopes that it helps students make sense of what's going on. And then we're going to pivot very, very quickly to what's next. If there's a transition, we were already thinking about some transition programming, some inaugural programming for early January, and then programming around the first 100 days of the next presidential term, whomever occupies the Oval Office. So there's a lot going on in lots of ways. Everything we do is open to the entire community, whether you are a student, member of staff or faculty, or an alum. You are welcome to participate.
This is a challenging time amidst an ongoing pandemic and a divisive election and political environment. Could you reflect on the ways that you see our Georgetown community come together?
Yeah. I first arrived on campus for the first time just over 30 years ago. My first time I ever set foot on campus was for my new student orientation. And one of the most memorable things was conversations around Georgetown's goal to help prepare us all to be men and women for others. It is helping us realize that we are part of something bigger than ourselves, part of a bigger community, and that we all have an obligation, no matter what we do, to help make sure that that community that we are a part of is better than when we entered into it. And I think that's a big part of what we try to do. One of the main objectives and ways that we try to do that is by encouraging students to sort of recognize the filter bubbles and echo chambers that we all live in through a series of conscious and subconscious decisions we make every day in our lives. We create these echo chambers and filter bubbles around ourselves. We tend to live in communities surrounded by people who think and sound like we do, and go to school or work surrounded by people who think and sound like we do. And our social media feeds are populated by people like us. And we get our information, our news from places that reinforce what we already think. And so I think a big part of our goal at the Institute, and I know as the broader campus community, is to, one, help students be aware of how they're subconsciously creating these echo chambers and these filter bubbles for themselves, and then equipping them with the knowledge and the tools to occasionally pop them and to step outside of those and to better understand one another. Part of the problem with our politics today, why it's so polarized, is we ascribe our political adversaries' motives before we listen to a word that they say. We just assume we know, but we don't ever take the time to actually sit there and listen to them. And if we understand their motives, then we can really begin the conversation. We're not doing that as much as we should. And I think that's important. One of my favorite statistics, Jack, is we conduct a couple of times a year a poll on civility and politics, where we track Americans' attitudes towards it. How bad do they think it is? Who do they blame? But do they really want it? And when we get to that last question, and we ask people, do you really want civility? 90% say yes, of course. But then ask the question a little bit differently. Agree or disagree with the two following statements. Number one, common ground and compromise are noble goals we want our leaders to aspire to. 87% of Americans say they agree with that. The very next one, I am tired of leaders who compromise on my values. I want them to stand up and fight the other side. 84% of Americans agree with that. It's as if people are saying, I absolutely want common ground. Just come over to where I'm standing, and then we'll be on common ground. They're not taking the time to actually listen to where the opponent is starting and seeing where we can meet along the way. That's our role. That's our goal. That's what we as Hoyas, we at GU Politics, I think can do.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thanks for being able to make this time during this very busy election season. In closing, is there one message you'd like to leave with the members of our community?
I think it's what we just discussed. We are all men and women for others. The public service and politics are noble pursuits. Too many young people today are drawn to Silicon Valley to go make change. And there's nothing wrong with that. But they're doing it in part because they don't think politics is any longer an appropriate vehicle to do that. It is, but only if we all participate, and not just on election day or election month, as the case is this year. It's staying engaged, staying involved, taking that time to pop those filter bubbles and finding the commonality. Then we can sort of get to that point where politics truly is a good thing.
Well, Mo, thank you. Thank you for joining me today. And thank you for the many ways you support our students and the civic life of our community. And I look forward to being with all of you again soon. Take care of yourselves and take care of everyone around you. For every Hoya, everywhere.